Welcome to the Infinite and Beyond, the MIT Alumni Show. I'm your trusted host, Rob Kalwarowski, MIT Class of 2010, world-renowned executive coach, author, and speaker. Each week, we are sharing the stories with our friends and classmates, fellow MIT alumni who've taken action to shape the world. We'll share what we've learned, top strategies, and bring our community together to help everyone achieve our goals. No, this show is not officially affiliated with MIT, so any views expressed on this show are of the host and guest only. This show is designed to build a community that trusts, connects, and shares with each other so we can all take action towards a better world. Let's get rolling. Welcome. We're back here at the Infinite and Beyond show for MIT alumni, and we have a special guest with us, Dr. Philip Kim. He's obviously MIT Class of 2010, and now he's a trauma and acute care surgeon and an assistant professor of surgery at University of Connecticut. Phil, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. Oh, of course, we got to introduce, for the folks who don't know you and maybe the folks who want to know about your journey from MIT to here, can you tell us a little bit about that story? How'd you get from MIT 2010 to surgery, double surgery?
Yeah, well, it's a good timing because, it's been a 14-year journey just to finish my training and a bit of a circuitous path, but I don't regret any of it, at least as of today. After college, I went straight to medical school, which a lot of people do, or take time off before you go to medical school. But during college is when I was a bit of a late bloomer. During sophomore years when I realized that I wanted to become a surgeon after shadowing some surgeons and anesthesiologists. Once I got into medical school, at least I majored in course 10 and course 7. So the medical school was really a culture shock. I'm sure a lot of doctors who went to MIT could understand. It's a very different way of learning. It's not just about problem solving like we're used to doing at MIT, but like regurgitating lots and lots of knowledge, which I was not good at. So it was definitely a culture shock. And the art of medicine where you don't really have a clear answer or incomplete data really bothered me. But regardless, when I was doing medical school, I learned, maybe I should learn more about the systems, and I missed the quantitative aspect of education. So I got a business school degree, which is, very different and exciting. And then after that, it was a long surgical training. I wanted to become a trauma surgeon during medical school after seeing the trauma bay. But no one warned me that it would take, 7 to 9 years. So I was pretty much pod committed and straight, one track minded, but I kept up and finished my trauma and general surgery training. In the middle, I took a 2-year break, which I highly recommend anyone who's taking a long journey to do an innovation fellowship in healthcare and surgical innovation in general, which was really some of the best 2 years of my life in San Francisco. So I really enjoyed that as well.
Amazing. I mean, I would love to hear, like you mentioned when we talked offline, that some of your job is that innovation in healthcare. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure, yeah. So I'm really lucky in that, when I was job searching this past year, almost everyone just searches for a 100% trauma surgeon or acute care surgeon, as we call it now, role. But I, really wanted to incorporate my engineering and innovation training into my faculty role or wherever I worked because I knew that was a big part of me. The opportunities aren't many out there, but thankfully I was really lucky to find at Harvard Healthcare and some UC systems as well that they were willing to have protected time carved out for you. So here at Harvard Healthcare, I spent a portion of my time in the innovation team, actually in my innovation office right now, where I helped advance the innovation engineer, specifically looking at not only new proposals that startups submit to our system for clinical testing or validation. So I review all the new proposals here. We're also building up our AI center in healthcare, which is relatively new. Now that AI is going to be permeating everything we do, especially in healthcare, we're trying to make sure we're at the front of that. And lastly, to also make sure that implementation of all our solutions is done in a safe way, because unlike where you can try an AI solution somewhere and if it doesn't work, it's okay. And with patient care, it's a big deal if it makes some mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, Phil, would you be able to share any cool tech that folks are building? Or is it too early for that?
Yeah, it's a little too early for that. I just started 2 months ago. Even when I was doing innovation fellowship, I think there's a lot of magic that happens when you put engineers and doctors together, because both of them barely speak the other's language, to be quite frank. So, engineers are really good at fixing problems and coming up with solutions. and doctors are really good at finding problems without any solutions. So I think it's like a match made that's really helpful. I really, my focus was more on the device space to really try to improve the devices that we use, but it kind of permeates in all aspects of health.
Amazing. So, Phil, of course, like you mentioned that there was, I mean, you've done a lot of different things. Like you did an MBA, you did medical school, you did like surgery as a specialty. What are some of the top learnings you've learned over that time?
Yeah, I guess if I had to summarize like the top three things I learned, especially after MIT, is that relationships and mentorship is really important. I would say anywhere, but especially in medicine and in the space I am, I definitely can say that I wouldn't have become a trauma surgeon if it wasn't for a close mentor during medical school and who shaped me and influenced me. And then also innovation, if I didn't, by chance meet someone, a surgeon who was doing innovation during my research fellowship, I would not be doing the work I'm doing now. So those mentors are extremely important. Sometimes coincidental, but you also have to put in the time to try to find the right mentors that you gravitate towards. So I would definitely recommend being intentional about that. Number two, I think in terms of leadership, I think authentic leadership is both, at least my personal opinion is that it's both personal vulnerability, so you can build trust and empower, and also to empower others. So the vulnerability allows you to build trust with others, but also your job is not just shining as a star in the front of the team, but also how do you enable your entire team, in case like a trauma team who may have never met each other and all work together to somehow magically perform together. And a lot of that has to do with empowerment to really be able to highlight what each one can do and is willing to do and put them to the task. So that's what I really do enjoy about trauma surgery, is not just the operating and the adrenaline that you see in the TV shows, but it's also leading a team, almost like a sports team, to try to accomplish a goal for one patient. And then lastly, the biggest learning is don't follow the status quo path. At least I can say that because I didn't. I took a lot of risky but unorthodox breaks for my surgical training. Even the MBA was, a lot of people kind of raised their eyebrows at me back in 2013 when I was doing that, because I was almost seen as a flight risk to be a doctor getting an MBA. People thought, oh, you can just go with the venture capital or leave medicine, etc. But however, I think you have to take the risk and know what the value is there for other things you can do and take them.
I mean, of course, I love that perspective as someone who's now an executive coach and speaking to you from Costa Rica. But I wanted to dig a little bit. Of course, like leadership is one of my things. And you mentioned the folks that you're doing surgery with, some of them you haven't met before. How do you start to empower them so quickly?
Yeah, I think that's the art and challenge of it. There are certain, I think, common practices you can shape, because especially in medicine where in trauma, there's a decent hierarchy of power. So it automatically makes people less likely to speak up. And that can be a problem, because when errors occur, usually you find out someone knew about the error but was too shy in speaking up, which is a big problem. So one thing I commonly do every time we do a universal timeout to confirm the correct patient, procedure, and side, I also say at the end, if anyone has any concerns throughout the surgery, I don't care who you are, please speak up and let me know, so that even the person cleaning the room can say something if they notice something is wrong, because everyone has two eyes that can contribute. And I think it starts from the leader, starting from the get-go, empowering everyone to have that attitude.
Yeah, I love that perspective, Phil. It's something, well, one is for folks out there, if you haven't yet, read Fearless Organization by Dr. Amy Edmondson. So she's a Harvard professor who invented somewhat the term psychological safety. And she did her research at hospitals, and she talks about it in the book, but basically she was confused why the hospitals that had the teams that had more errors actually had better outcomes for the patient. And you found exactly this, right? Is like the folks that had less errors, it wasn't they had less errors, it was just nobody talked about them. And so when you talked about them, then people solved the problem versus it arriving at the patient's problem. And so, yeah, it's totally a great foundation. And then the other thing that you're doing is like setting expectation. Is I don't see leaders do this enough. I actually was like coaching someone to do it this morning, where I said to them, it's like, set the expectation is I expect you being my team, to tell me when I'm not doing something correctly, or if you notice something, or if I missed a detail, like whatever but you're setting the expectation that that is what they need to do. And so that changes how they think about it in their minds. Now it's not just like, oh yeah, like every corporate says, oh yeah, we have an open door policy. And how many folks actually walk in and say something,
No,
right? But it's
yeah.
like setting that expectation changes how people perceive it. And I love that you're doing that.
And I think one thing as leaders, especially as you get older, is that you forget the separate realities that everyone has when they're in the room, even though it's the same exact surgery. I remember when I was a medical student, when I contaminated my glove, being so scared to speak up that I need to change my glove. Even like from my perspective now, it's like not a big deal at all, like to change a glove. I'd rather you do it. But I remember being so scared to say that when I was a medical student. So it's a completely separate reality that you almost forget when you get older, but you have to acknowledge that people come in with their, different realities and you have to bring them together.
Yeah. Phil, the other thing I want to dig in with you, right, is this alternative path, right? And you mentioned it, right? And it's something like I was talking to, I think it was my marketing folks actually the other day, and they were saying something around like, what do folks do out of MIT? And I was like, well, they do big tech, or they start their own business,
Or medicine.
right? And
Yeah.
it's like, how did you start to think about your career path in a different way?
Yeah, I think really MIT guided me in that because, I majored in course 10 chemical engineering, and I think that's notorious among all the engineering specialties for people doing like basically rolling an 8 ball to find out what you're going to be end up doing. I think it was traditionally like oil and big pharma, and that was the trend. But like my class went into medicine, consulting, Google, tech, finance. People do all different things with it. I think I think it's actually number of people doing chemical engineering is actually small. I think the MIT really helped guide us to not only learn how to problem solve, but use it in any field you want. And I think that was the empowering component. And yeah, I think for me, it was always the dissatisfaction with what I was getting didn't feel enough. Like, you could argue like a medical school education at Harvard should be above and beyond what you want, but I felt like it was missing any education in regards to systems or hospital, like how to change the hospital system, healthcare system. So I think some of it is just us being discontent with it. Like just like a good engineer, it finds ways to make things better always.
Starting with a point of friction and pain is always a good way to end up somewhere, at least purpose driven.
Yeah, exactly. To make it more efficient or to optimize yourself even more. I think it gives you the intention and the motivation.
When you were at MIT, did you feel like you were the only one who didn't belong? Do you compare yourself with successful classmates? Do you feel like you're constantly needing to do more to feel like you're enough? Many of us feel that. I felt it too, but you don't have to feel that way anymore. You can get better results, achieve more, and feel more fulfilled doing it. I can say that because I've done it, and I coach my clients to do it too. I use scientifically proven methods, including internal family systems, values-based leadership, and habit-building techniques to transform your psychology and your life. These trusted strategies will get you results quickly, in some cases, even in our first session, and they'll last you for years. Now, my coach isn't just about learning. It's about taking action and creating results. Results that'll boost your confidence, unlock doors to opportunities you never thought possible, and equip you with strategies that only a select few ever master. But here's the thing, the longer you wait, the more opportunities slip by. Imagine what your life could look like just weeks from now. Having taken the first step, take action now. Go to robkalvarowski.com and book a complimentary call with me. Phil, I know we talked about this, but I love your answer to this question. What motivates you and what inspires you to make your impact?
Yeah, I think for me, at the end of the day, is to be able to, help those who are injured. And for me, it's always been a privilege. The reason why I chose trauma surgery among all the wonderful medical specialties is that you have the privilege of being present and sometimes even being able to help people at their most vulnerable moments in their life. And I think that is a huge responsibility. It's definitely not an easy responsibility, especially when you're telling families that their loved ones are lost or didn't make it. But I still remind myself, every single time that it's an enormous privilege to be able to be present, and at least that's been my North Star throughout my very long medical training journey.
It's incredible. And where are you heading, Phil? So, like, of course, you're doing a few different things, but I mean, that's the way you've designed your career path. So, what does the future look like for you?
Yeah, I think there's twofold. One is, be an excellent trauma surgeon who can take care of one patient at a time, like I mentioned, but bring a team together to save as many as we can save and continue that privilege. And also, number two, change the status quo of what healthcare systems does. And that means innovation. And innovation is a fancy word that just means do things better. Do not accept that it's okay to have problems while you're at the hospital, or safety errors, or bed sores because you're lying in the bed too long. I think it all means that we can do things better. If it was my mom, if it was me, I would want this to be better. And I think that's the attitude that we come from. And my hope is that not only can I help usher in new solutions that other brilliant people and smarter people are bringing to us, but also make some of my own as I get older.
Amazing. And on that note, right, of course, our MIT classmates, there's a bunch of brilliant folks that are doing different things. Like, what are some of the folks or types of people that you would want to meet?
Yeah, I think folks that are involved in the medical device space of really disrupting the specific field that they're in, I would love to touch base because we'll just probably geek out and talk about it for hours. And then obviously, one part that I'm starting to learn more, even though I have my MBA, I'm a little rusty, is the whole financial element and how things work with the entrepreneurial, investing space, because it has to, not only has to be a good idea, but it has to be sustainable and marketable and profit generating for things to lift off. So that's the part that I would love to learn more from others as well.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of VCs in our class.
Yeah, exactly, VC people. Yep, because I'm sort of starting to become an internal VC for our hospital, so I got to learn from the best. So
totally. And Phil, how would you like to support the community?
Yeah, so obviously anyone considering a career in medicine or surgery or trauma surgery, I can be of utmost help. At least having been gone down the long path, I can tell you what to expect and what not to expect. And then anyone interested in innovating in healthcare with new solutions, Hartford Healthcare has actually developed quite a good ecosystem for new solutions that may make sense in certain spaces, where we definitely have some VCs that we're partnering with already. So it can definitely be an avenue for people who are interested in validating their ideas in a clinical setting. Because I think there's a lot of funding sources and there's a lot of ideas, but I feel like there's a lot of valley of death where people then need to confirm or clinically test their, healthcare solutions, and that's where I think the opportunity that we provide and hopefully I can provide exists.
What excites you the most in that space?
I think for me, AI has definitely been a huge generation. So we're partnering with MIT, and we're finding that AI can do better than doctors and humans in general in a lot of risk prediction modeling, and even like utilizing something as simple as like an EKG to diagnose bigger health problems. So I think that's like the true disruption will come from some of those new solutions. It's going to take time, but I think it will come. And then number two, I think, is disruptions when it comes to specific devices. I know it's a bit more hidden to the public eye because devices are often used by surgeons in the operating room, but there's been tremendous leaps and changes in what we do, including, AR in surgery. The people are now using AR goggles to guide spine surgery or to be able to see where the bones are instead of like imagining in your mind. Which is like pretty amazing stuff. Like it almost seems like it's like a video game, but you're actually doing it in surgery. So that's how I justify playing my VR games to my wife. So
I love the headset too. It's in maintenance. So I used to work in heavy industry, and the maintenance folks did the same thing for both training and for like real time kind of heads up displays. So like you would go to the equipment and they would have ability to open the manual with the troubleshooting guide, and like it would be risk predicted and like all these things, and it would show you like this is where you want to turn the bolt. And so I mean, of course it's very similar with less
definitely.
risk a little bit.
I think healthcare is a little slow when it comes to adopting some of the simple solutions, obviously because the risks are much higher. In some ways are higher, but at the same time we're very slow to adopt it. There's a joke that it takes 10 years from evidence-based like trials and evidence to full adoption. in healthcare in general. So we're trying to speed up that curve as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's a systems thing, and it's totally.
A culture thing, I would say, more as much as it's a systems thing. I think the problem is it's like a performance engine really hates risk, right? Anything new, if it goes
Yeah.
badly, can be catastrophic. So they naturally just continue to rely on what works. The problem with that mentality is you'll never change and never keep up and innovate. So you almost have a separate engine where it's all about innovation, taking risks that are reasonable to test it out in small amounts, minimal viable products, fail quickly, and try to improve what we do.
Now you're talking. Like, when you say you're bringing these new technologies or new process, like, how do you take a hospital environment and build in that like growth mindset, that continuous improvement methodology?
Yeah, I think the actual like implementation where rubber meets the road is that you need very strong clinical champions and partnerships, like people who actually will not only say they'll do it, but actually put in the time to try to do it. And I think the key is early quick wins. So we always talk about build an MVP and do a small pilot trial. So you do it in one space, not the whole hospital at once, but one space of the hospital where you think it'll be helpful. And if that really does well, people get buy-in, and that can allow you to then build upon and sort of build a coalition to succeed. And if it doesn't
Mhm.
go well, then you know quickly to fail and then shelve it and move on. I think that's the faster we have those life cycles with minimal harm, I think is the faster way for us to grow. So at least that's been our approach to try to be lean. But you need a lot of multidisciplinary team members for that to happen, because you can't just have the vice reps, you can't just have the research people. You need to have the nurses, the doctors, the techs, everyone who's involved in the entire process involved, which is why it's a true village effort.
It's all, yeah. Culture change is never easy, but there's a lot of things you can do, and you are doing right. And so that's the big piece for folks out there. And obviously, if you're listening to this, I would totally recommend you go back a week or two, and listen to the podcast we did with Rosto Rotz. He does transformation. He's the head of transformation at a large chocolate company that makes truffles. You might be able to distill who that is, but we're not allowed to say it. So
Yep.
I would totally recommend going back, and checking that one out, because that's what he does for work. And there was a ton of great insights there. Phil, is there anything you'd like to leave with the community this week, or any advice that you want to share?
Yeah, I guess the other two pieces of advice that I want to share, not only the part on finding, building relationships and mentorship, but at least for me personally, leaving MIT, while I felt like I had the utmost preparation to solve any problem given to me in any problem set that the world gave, I felt like, at least for me, I needed more training in negotiation and public speaking, because those are two areas that I'm still working on to be better. And I felt like those areas that I really needed more as I grew older in my career to do well, that I invested further education on. So definitely want people to at least think about that negotiation and public speaking, especially if your job requires it. And then number three, I think, as always, I think when you're at MIT and a pre-med, like all you can think about is I gotta take my MCAT, I gotta take these classes. And a lot of it is like checking the boxes, which we all had to do at some point in our career. But I think really try to find things that you enjoy and a passion of yours that makes you different. And I find that the things that you enjoy end up being the things that you thrive and excel in anyway, because you enjoy it. So try to find that nice Venn diagram of places where, if you really hate research, don't like do research for 10 years, like it's not what your calling is, and why are you doing it? So I think learn to pivot early and find out what's not for you and what's for you. I think that took some time for me in my life to figure out, like, what do I really want to do, and sort of that soul searching is the most fun and also can be most anxious part of your life too. But at the same time, I think it's important to really try to find what your true north is and what your passion is.
It's, yeah, 100% with that. And if folks are listening and you're trying to find that, let me know, because I can help you with that. But it's also, yeah, like for me, I totally resonate with you about negotiation, about public speaking. Like, I worked with a speaker coach for, it was close to 2 years to develop my speaking, and then TED, and then now obviously I do professional speaking. But it's totally a thing. And then the other thing the other thing that I found that I wasn't prepared for was a lot of the stuff that I teach now about, like, relationships, building power and influence, like being deliberate and strategic about how you go about the workplace, because you can vastly make things happen more quickly and easily if you do the right things. And you can also vastly make your life very hard. And like I did, make your life very hard and very like, and hold yourself back. And so there's like, and of course at MIT, right, it's like getting it right and getting the solution and being the expert. And it's like, there's a lot more to the workplace because you're dealing with people, and people have a different roadmap. However, it's defined. So once you know what it is, then you can do the right things.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I resonate with that in that, I think we're really good at thriving when the variables are known and the data is complete and we can arrive to a solution. But I feel like as I get older, there's more and more, like literally trauma surgery in a nutshell is acting on incomplete data. It's almost like a game of Texas Hold'em. Like you only get two cards when they present and you got to make decisions. And I always tell people not making a decision at the moment is a decision. So any delay in decision is a decision as well, and that's why it's not for everybody. And that there's a time element that can be stressful, but at the same time, I think knowing that you're able to make those decisions with the data that you have at the best of ability. I think that's a big part of what we do.
How do you navigate that, Phil? Like, you have to make a decision. I mean, you're right. Like, no decision is a decision, right?
Mhm.
But how do you navigate that pressure that you basically need to be right, otherwise someone could die?
Yeah, it's definitely at this point, I would argue the most stressful part of what I do is the decision making. When you're a trainee and training to become a surgeon, the most stressful thing is, can I do this chest tube properly? Can I do this bedside surgical procedure well, so that I can save this patient's life? But all those sort of stresses go less and less away in your mind as you train up. And now what keeps me up at night is, did I make the right decision? Should I have done this instead or done X, Y, Z? And sometimes you find out later that the incomplete data that you didn't know had something else that would have changed your decision, but there's no way for you to know. So then it's still hard on you, because if you knew, you could have made a difference. Maybe nobody knows for sure. But thankfully, I'm lucky in that I joined a group where the culture is very transparent in terms of struggling with these difficult moments. And, we have a really good culture where we have M&Ms. I don't know if you've heard of the morbidity and mortality conferences that are internal only, where we talk about basically complications that occurred or any deaths that occurred, to talk about, are there individual issues that we could have improved, are there system-based issues that we could have improved, so that when the same patient comes around the second time, we have a better chance of helping. So I think that culture is really, really important, and I think it's nice to even translate to other fields when something bad happens, not to point fingers, but really to talk about how can we improve as a team. So it definitely is not easy, especially when you have multiple difficult ones in a row. But I always say we signed up to do this, so it is part of my job. Yeah.
It doesn't make that's still incredibly hard.
Yeah, it's definitely. I don't think it will get, and I don't think it should get any easier, because, those decisions are so grave. They're so important and so impactful that I would never want to be numb to those stressors, if that makes sense. So,
Totally.
yeah.
I do also want to echo what you mentioned, and it's something I often coach my folks to do, is have meetings. Well, actually, two alternate weeks. So every week you have a meeting on a specific day at a specific time for like 30 minutes. But one of them is very much celebrations. So it's like, well, how can we do more of this? If someone did something like amazing or spectacular, like they get recognized, like it's a very much like a, kind of a positive thing, because it's like the statistic, I believe, was 60% of the workforce hasn't heard something that they like a positive feedback in a year.
That's
Which,
true.
if you're listening to this, the easiest, cheapest, well, it's free, easiest, fastest way to engage your folks is actually tell them that they're doing good things
Yeah.
and be specific about it. So, like, hey, Phil, I really like that answer you gave. I really thought that it was, very insightful how you said this, right? And it's like specific, as close to the moment as possible. It's like, give them that feedback and it's free.
Yeah, yeah, we're definitely guilty of that in medicine too. We always joke that no news is good news because nobody said anything bad, but that's not how it should be. It should really be, thanking people for showing up, doing their job, and especially going above and beyond. Oftentimes, we're asked to do something beyond what we were expecting to do that day, and to be able to do
It's,
that.
I mean, you know this better than I do, right? It's a natural human process is we're designed to look for threats more than we are to bank wins, right? And so as someone who does a lot of psychology work with my clients, it's like it's important to look and recognize not like yourself but also the folks around you, because you want to build that momentum, is keep that going, right? And it is, and that will pay off in those times where it is tough, is you're remembering like, oh yeah, I did good things. And I actually have a spreadsheet for me that I have, like, literally I have things that people have emailed or DM'd or said to me. I keep it in a spreadsheet because when things are going rough and I'm like struggling, I like have a place where I can go, yeah, like I'm not a complete piece of garbage.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. Yeah, I think especially to ourselves, sometimes we have the least grace, and I'm working on that as well to understand that we're not perfect and we will make errors, and I will continue to make errors, but our job is to do our best in the moment. So
Absolutely. And yeah, for folks out there, amazing. So you can connect with Phil. I've dropped his LinkedIn in the podcast notes as well as his Twitter in the podcast notes. Of course, I wouldn't recommend going to see him in person.
no, no,
If you
I
can
always
avoid
joke
it.
my job is to make sure you never see me again or never see me, period. So it's great, at
But
least
if
in
you
the
get
trauma thing.
injured and you're in Hartford, then you'll see him in person.
Exactly, yeah. But hopefully never afterwards. So it means I did my job.
And then, of course, if you're in the medical device space or in AI relative to medicine, of course, reach out to Phil. Or if you're a VC and you want to bounce some ideas, absolutely connect with Phil as well. And yeah, it was an incredible interview. Phil, any last words you'd like to leave folks with this week?
No, I think I've given all the unsolicited advice I could. So I hope that was helpful to at least any listeners out there, that to share a bit of the personal side of what it feels to leave MIT and then become a surgeon, but also try to keep up with the gifts that we were given at MIT, for lack of a better term. So you keep using it to help the rest of the people out there.
Thank you so much. And for me, I just want to echo a few things, right, for folks. Is one is the growth and the open mindset that Phil has, right? Is looking at new opportunities, being expansive in not just this is the track I need to take, but it's this is what I love. This is what I'm good at. These are the things that fulfill me, and this is how my North Star is aligned. And then the next thing is what you're doing at work, right? Is like soliciting that feedback from folks around you. And even though he's in a position of authority, right? He's giving permission and holding his team accountable to holding himself accountable. And that's something that leaders, you need to do more of, because you don't have eyes that look back at you.
No, and it certainly
And
doesn't come
yeah,
naturally. And I think a lot of it is being intentional really matters, because we fall to our least intentional parts when crisis hits sometimes.
absolutely. Yeah, the last thing, right, is that ability to continually improve and to problem solve. And that's what he was talking about with the M&M meetings, right? And this happens in every business, right? And root cause analysis is like something I learned in engineering, right? And this is what it is. It's you had something fail, or you had a problem, and now we're trying to figure out what was the cause, and typically the system, because that's when you're going to impact more than just that one event. It's you're going to impact multiple potential future failures, right? And
Yeah.
so it's never about the person, and it's always about what's the system and even the decision process, right? Because yeah, I've talked about this a lot
No,
before,
no, no, no.
but
It's great to learn again and be reminded that, I love that we probably just came from engineering our whole process, but it took a while for medicine to adopt some of these no-brainer principles. So,
yeah, yeah. And so just like for you, Phil, right? So I'm friends with a gentleman in the heavy industry space. Actually, he does a lot of work also at hospitals.
mhm.
He's the guy that you call when you have like a massive explosion at a plant and you've killed, 100 people, or like you have something that costs you 100 million, or you have, I don't know, these big systemic failures. And he's done it for 50 years. And we were in Memphis at a conference and I was like, "Hey Bob, like when have you ever encountered it was like somebody who was like deliberately sabotaging?" And I think he said it was one time in his whole career. And it's
Otherwise,
it's just
awesome.
back to the underlying assumption that that's basically true, is
Yeah,
everyone's trying to do their best with what they have in whatever moment that is. And if you make that assumption, then it's so easy to not blame the person and go underneath of that to like, why did they decide to do this, or what was the business process or system that led them to doing this. And that's where the meat is.
yeah, it's true. It's like, the system is almost like the leadership. You have to set it up so people can thrive, not fail. Yeah,
Absolutely. So
thanks for
that's
sharing,
enough of
Rob.
my rants.
No, 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 that was really helpful. And, I feel like even though I gave all this advice, I'm still learning so much. And I think that's the thing that you gain from lots of training and education, is that you find out there's more that you don't know than you know, but it keeps you humble.
100%.
Yeah.
It's that you know enough to know that you don't know anything.
I think most of us at MIT learned that the hard way. So
That's
that
right.
there are people who fly above you, and the rest of us are just trying to walk. So
Alrighty, folks. Thank you so much for listening. Phil, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.
thank you for having me.